There's a hidden cost to implementing HubSpot, and no one is talking about it. We call it the adoption gap cost. And it's anything from 2 times to 20 times the cost of the software itself. If you're going to close the adoption gap, the space between buying software and making it useful in your business, you're going to have to pay the adoption gap cost. Let's make sure it's as small as possible. I'm Tony Dowling, and I help businesses close the adoption gap. In this video, we'll break down the 3 steps that you need to go through in order to close the gap, and we'll talk about closing it as quickly as possible. Once you've closed it, you'll get on your way to winning with HubSpot and paying back all that setup cost. More than 50% of businesses that implement HubSpot don't close that adoption gap, and that means that adoption gap cost spirals out of control to thousands and thousands of pounds. If you want to learn more about our services and how we can help, check out the links in the description of the video. When you buy in HubSpot or buy in anything, your attention, led by the salesperson, is on the attributes, the features and the benefits. Quite normal. You'll be talking about the results you will expect HubSpot to provide. You'll be talking about the problems that it'll fix. All quite normal. But there's rarely any talk about the work you have to do in order to get that adoption gap closed, in order to onboard HubSpot and adopt it successfully. There'll be no chat about the culture change that has to happen, what you need to do in order to create an environment in which HubSpot can be successfully implemented. There'll be no consideration of the strategy that you'll need in order to close the adoption gap, or the strategy that you'll need to build into HubSpot in order to make it useful. And they probably won't talk about what parts of the platform to get to grips with first, so that you can see an immediate, if not immediate, really fast return on your investment, to give you encouragement, to provide you with revenue, to continue to close that adoption gap, to continue to implement HubSpot to greater and greater levels. Let's think about HubSpot like buying a car. You're buying a tool to solve a problem. Let's say the problem that you're trying to solve is one of transport. Okay, you want to drive to London, or maybe you need a regular transport back and forth to your place of work. So you look at all the alternatives, shop around, you talk to your friends, maybe you read some blogs, watch some videos, and you finally decide that a car is the right way to go. In exactly the same way that if you're looking into how you can grow your business, you might see that a CRM is one of the important steps in order to be able to achieve that. Now you've decided on the car, you've moved around all the garages, probably online first of all, but you'll certainly go into the dealerships and talk to salespeople who'll talk to you about the cars themselves. They'll talk to you about their engines and their performance and their efficiency, what colours you can get, how many people that will be able to be seated within the car. Exactly like the beauty parade that you'll watch if you're buying software. The vendors will roll the software out in front of you and show you how many seats you need and how the different levels of subscription work, how to fix this problem or that problem. Finally, you decide on the right car. You've got the color that you want, you've got the specs that you want, the extras and everything else. You've got a delivery date sorted. Maybe they've even given you an incentive to buy the car. Maybe you've got a financial incentive to help you put your signature on that dotted line. Maybe you created a rational list of pros and cons like some buyers do, or maybe you just loved the color and liked the smell when you sat in it. Maybe it felt right. If you think about it, it's a very similar process to anything you buy. Just a car is expensive and therefore it takes longer to do. Software equally is expensive and it'll take you a good while to decide on the right software. Now, having bought the tool, bought the car, you're ready to go. You're ready to undertake your journey, maybe your drive to London. So you stood at the side of the road, your car's parked in front of you, you're ready to go, and you suddenly realise you've got no fuel in the car. You don't know how to get to London and you don't have a map. Maybe, worst case, you don't even have a license and you can't drive. So you've got to go through learning to drive, you've got to go through getting your license, you've got to tax the car, you've got to insure the car, you've got to put fuel in it. Maybe you've got to organise your passengers, you've got to get everybody into the right place at the right time. Suddenly this very simple solution, I'll get a car to do this thing, has got really complicated. It's exactly the same thing when it comes to growing in your business using HubSpot. You've bought the tool, you stand by the side of the road looking at your HubSpot, And now you don't know where to start. You don't know how to get people to use it. You don't know how to use it yourself. And you certainly don't know how it in itself is going to help you to grow your business. And don't forget, you've also got to convince the passengers that HubSpot is the right choice. It's the thing that's going to take them where they need to be, and they have to change the way they were doing everything beforehand and jump into the new tool. That in itself is a massive task. Now, I'm not saying any of these things are impossible. People do them all the time. What I am saying is more difficult than you might think, and it's certainly not been talked about in the run-up to the software purchase. It's not been talked about in terms of when you buy and price up the software. You're probably only looking at the cost of the software, the subscription cost for HubSpot. No one is talking about the additional costs, the hidden costs, if you like, the cost of the things that we've just talked about. So let's look at the costs themselves. We'll look at the cost of HubSpot first, and then we'll look at the cost of closing the adoption gap. Buying software seems to get more complicated all the time, and HubSpot is particularly complicated when it comes to purchasing. There are individual hubs that you can buy. There's a sales hub, a marketing hub, there's a customer service hub, there's a content hub, and there's an operations hub. Each of the hubs comes at a starter, a pro, or an enterprise level, depending on the size of your business. If you're a salesperson, you'll benefit from the sales hub, as you'd expect, at either starter, pro, or enterprise level. If you're a marketer, again, you'll benefit from the marketing hub at starter, pro, or enterprise level. If you're a customer service expert, again, you can choose from starter, pro, or enterprise level and get the tools of the trade, the tools of the customer success agent's trade that work directly in HubSpot. Content hub will allow you to supercharge your content using the latest AI, using the latest remix and content generation tools. An ops hub will keep your portal functioning smoothly, keep your data clean, and provide superpower for some of those automations. Simply put, the cheapest way to buy HubSpot is to buy the starter versions. It's probably about £50 a month, and you're going to get a lot of functionality. I think it's a hugely valuable hub, but it's not going to come with any automation. For automation, you're going to need to move to the pro level. Now, for the pro level, you're probably looking at hundreds of pounds per month. Once you get that pro level underway, you'll have sales automation, marketing automation, customer service automation, and so on. You'll be able to build workflows that will do things automatically for you. Enterprise is the most expensive and probably running at thousands of pounds per month, but the power that you get for that is incredible. It's like having a Death Star. You'll be able to do all sorts of stuff probably you've never even dreamed of, but that are insanely valuable when it comes to running your business, your sales and your marketing, and your customer service strategies. Now we've talked about the software costs. That'll range from tens of pounds per month to hundreds of pounds a month, even to thousands of pounds a month. Let's have a look at what else you're going to be spending money, time and effort on in order to close the gap. The first thing you might think of is somebody like me, a HubSpot partner. It's a very good idea to get your setup structured properly and have yourself supported through the process to make sure everything is done right the way that you need it done. And as a rule of thumb, I found that partner onboarding usually costs about the same as the software. So for a starter onboarding, it's probably going to be a few £100s. For a pro onboarding, it'll probably be thousands of pounds. For an enterprise onboarding, it might be tens of thousands of pounds, depending on how deeply you all go into it, right? So take your monthly cost of your software, multiply it by the year, and you'll have, roughly speaking, the cost of the onboarding. Obviously, there's an awful lot of latitude there, but generally speaking, properly constructed training and onboarding, that's what it's going to cost for each of those software tiers. So that's the cost of the software doubled straight away, if not a little bit more. What else are we going to be spending time, effort, and money on? Well, the first thing you may not have realized is your teams themselves are going to be involved in setting up, planning, and designing HubSpot. So let's take them out of the business for that period. It may take a few hours for the starter version, up to many hours, days probably, of effort in order to plan and design HubSpot to the level that you need it done. Once they've done the planning, once you've actually constructed HubSpot, you've got the training to contend with. So now your partner, or maybe using the HubSpot Academy, your teams are going to need to take time off in order to learn how to use the thing. And by use the thing, there is lots to learn. There's the data structure, the individual tools, it's the reporting, there's a load of things. And clearly that must be done. There's no point in having people who don't know how to use HubSpot in the business. So it's time out of the business. And then the last one to think about is something called the experience curve or the learning curve. The reality is you're going to hit a reduction in production while you implement HubSpot, where things were working at whatever level they were working at before. Unless it was massively dire, which I guess is possible, you're likely to go down in terms of production, productivity, I should say, down in terms of productivity before you can come up the other side utilizing the HubSpot tools to their full extent. This is the period it takes people to learn the new system. They'll be less productive until they learn it, and then the productivity goes up through the roof, paying back those initial costs. So now you can assume closing the adoption gap cost is going to be made up of those things: the cost of the software itself, the cost of the partner onboarding, the time of the people within your organization who need to plan, design, and implement the software, the training that they need to undertake in order to get to learn the software, and that period of adjustment when they move from the way they were working to the way that they're going to be working. Now, if you're lucky and that gap closes fairly quickly, you can very quickly start to pay back that and get that return on investment. If you're unlucky, like more than 50% of businesses where the implementation goes wrong, that adoption gap grows, is going to get longer and longer, costing you more and more. If you're not careful about closing the adoption gap, that adoption gap cost will spiral out of control. The longer the adoption gap runs for and the more friction that it creates within your business, the more money it's going to cost you. Until you get to the point you'll get so fed up of using HubSpot, because it'll be the tool's fault, that you'll look to bin it and get something else in. You'll look to change the CRM, and it might not be for the first time either. So the entire thing has just been a sunk cost into the business that you'll need to write off, because you're not going to get a return from it. In fact, you're going to swap it out, rip and replace it for something else. It's an absolute disaster. It sounds crazy, I know, but there are hundreds of businesses going through this same cycle of investment, gap cost, friction, and then rip and replace and try to do it all again. So it becomes pretty obvious to think about why the salespeople are concentrating on the features and the benefits and the results that HubSpot will bring, and not the cost of the adoption gap that you're going to have to pay in order to get the thing working and running in the first place. The only problem with that, apart from the fact that the client has got very little idea as to what's going to be involved and what it's going to take to close the gap, is that it actually makes the implementation much, much harder. It makes everything harder. I've only budgeted for the software cost. I've only budgeted for a short amount of time. Now suddenly this guy sat in front of me and he's telling me I'm going to have to pay the same again for the partner support. I'm going to have to take my people off the road. I'm going to have to put them into meeting rooms for hours at a time. I'm going to have to train my people in order to get it used. I just wasn't thinking of that at the beginning. I just didn't have that on my radar. It's hugely problematic. Maybe some of this stuff resonates with you. I'd love to hear your stories of this, if this has happened to you or your business, and maybe you can drop them in the comments so we can all share that story together. So it's clear that reducing the cost of the adoption gap is massively beneficial. Reducing the time it takes us to close the adoption gap, to implement HubSpot properly and get it working in the business, is a priority for the business. How do we do it? There's three areas that we want to think about. There's the people and the culture of the organization. Can we create a culture where people are psychologically safe enough that they're happy to embrace change, they're happy to make mistakes, they're happy to learn, they're happy to take this productivity dip with leadership's support? Is the culture one of purpose? Is there a reason for bringing HubSpot in, or any other change that you're going to do for that matter? Can people get behind that purpose? Can we turn it into a bit of a mission? Can we get people on board? Because those things really motivate people, really motivate the culture, and really help us get HubSpot established. The second thing is your adoption gap strategy itself. How are you going to close that gap? How are you going to get from where you are to where you want to be with HubSpot? What does the plan look like? You might want to download our adoption gap framework to have a look at how we suggest you do it. But you certainly need that strategy. You can't just step into implementing HubSpot and expect it to work. And finally, there's the key piece of introducing your sales and marketing strategy, customer service strategy, your go-to-market strategy, if you like, into HubSpot as well. HubSpot allows you to create a management control system based on the goals, the KPIs, the activity targets that you put in HubSpot, that allows you to keep control of your team, keep control of your efforts to make sure that you're hitting those strategic objectives and winning. This is the whole point. This is where we want to get to. We want to get to the point where HubSpot is controlling our business efforts to grow. It's helping us grow, it's empowering the growth, and it's controlling the activity. You're not able to get there unless you've closed the adoption gap. There's a load of work involved, but as you can see, once it's done, you can swiftly move into the making money part of the operation. You can swiftly move on to HubSpot empowering, enabling, HubSpot making things easier. And the faster you move into that phase, the faster you'll see that return on investment. So there's two choices. Either stay in the adoption gap, costing yourself more and more and more money, or close the adoption gap and move quickly into the recuperation phase, the phase where you get to the return on the investment. As I mentioned, if you look in the description of the video or in the channel itself, you'll see various resources that we have available, including a free guide to an adoption gap framework. Have a look at how we suggest you close the adoption gap, or hit me up, let me know. If you've got any questions about this or anything related to this topic, drop us a comment, send me an email, or whatever you like. I'd love to talk to you about it. And you can hear me talk more about this stuff here on the YouTube channel, but also on LinkedIn, where we do regular lives and posts, on our blog on www.realinbound.co.uk, and on Substack, where we host our podcast, HubSpot is Not a Strategy. Because HubSpot in itself isn't a strategy. You need to think about all the things that we've talked about in the video today in order to get the most value out of it. Other than that, I wish you best of luck and see you in the next video.